When Fallout New Vegas first came out, to say the reception surrounding the game was wholly positive would just be a flat out lie. Between performance, the game's empty world, and poor visuals, a lot of people weren't really all that keen on it, with probably the biggest argument made against it was that, well, it kind of just felt like a Fallout 3 DLC. Of course, if you come out with a statement like that nowadays, people probably won't have the nicest things to say about you, which Josh Sawyer found out recently. There's some crazy revisionist history surrounding New Vegas, and regardless of reality, looking at just the base game without any of its additional content, you can see how true that DLC complaint really is. And with the Fallout 3 remaster probably not releasing until the tail end of the year if we're lucky, what can I say, with the countdown and everything, I was kind of in the mood to explore the capital Wasteland some more. But this isn't the capital Wasteland. This is the Mojave. I wanted to see what this world space would look like if it truly was just a DLC for Fallout 3, removing all of the, well, New Vegas from New Vegas, most of it anyways. I don't think I realised the scale of this task going into it, however. Due to deadlines and other things, there's some stuff I didn't go out of my way to change, because it'd just be way too big of an undertaking, like the architecture for example. A lot of the buildings in the Mojave wouldn't fit in if they were just plopped right into the capital Wasteland. There's far too much wood, and weirdly enough, despite Obsidian and Bethesda both sort of relying on the exact same texture sources and references, New Vegas' textures have a different style to those assets from Fallout 3. Just to sort of give you the numbers on how big this undertaking would be, there's over 18,000 assets from Fallout 3 in New Vegas, which is just over 30% of, well, all of them. There's still 20,000 that are unique to New Vegas, and I'm gonna be so real, that's kind of a lot. So what I did do was change pretty much everything else, the noticeable things that make the Mojave feel distinct. The landscape, weathers, trees, some enemies, and of course building up that Vegas area so it feels a lot more like DC. There's some gameplay mods in here too, so yeah. What really inspired this though was an incredible work in progress mod by Conan Troutman called New Vegas Vanilla Plus Interior Lighting. You probably saw this in a Triangle City community post, which also shared some screenshots from the mod that's currently in beta, but what it aims to do is upgrade New Vegas' interiors to bring them more in line with Fallout 3's. Because who would have thought that only having 18 seconds of dev time, they would have had to cut corners somewhere. Unfortunately, interiors seem to be one such place. Comparing Fallout 3 and New Vegas' interiors is just a night and day difference. Fallout 3's are incredibly atmospheric, and paired with the OST, some are genuinely haunting. New Vegas on the other hand are kind of, well, brown, or orange I guess. The point is the majority of them are incredibly one note, with nowhere near the sort of diversity of lighting and interiors that Fallout 3 had. So then when you compare areas from the vanilla game with the ones in this mod that is inspired from those Fallout 3 ones, it's just easy to tell which is better. The lighting feels a lot more natural, which helps the interiors feel less disconnected from the rest of the world, and the use of post-processing, extra particles and details added in to some of these interiors goes a long way and finally makes these interiors feel finished. It does also change up some locations. The first one that stood out to me on my playthrough was the Nevada Highway Patrol Station. It looks amazing with this mod installed. The added windows do so much to brighten up this place, and it's a massive upgrade from just how grey this area is in the base game. Honestly, the model for behind this one has done an incredible job, and it's definitely a mod that I'm going to be using in my load order once it's finally finished. But this did get me thinking, if New Vegas could look this good with Fallout 3 style interior lighting, what would the game look like if it basically was just Fallout 3? So I got to messing around a bit. First, the trees. I used Base Object Swapper initially just to see how well this would even look in the first place, which for those of you who don't know is an amazing framework that basically allows for mod authors to add more variance in the visuals of the objects in the wasteland. For example, you can have more types of cars, workbenches and more. There's a ton of mods that use this on Nexus already, and it really helps reduce the amount of repeated assets in the wasteland. For this though, we obviously didn't do that, just flat out replacing the Joshua trees with a 100% chance to instead replacing them with DC's burnt out evergreens. Of course, we don't have LOD for these, so it's really in the immediate area that you can see the difference that these makes, and it is kind of a big one. I was happy to leave this as it is for now and get back to it later so we can get those LODs. With that done, I looked into how to go about changing the weather. Initially, I did this via a really lazy script to replace both the climate and image space from the Mojave with those in the capital, which does give us that amazing green filter in all of its glory. But it was at this point that I didn't want to risk potentially suffering from New Vegas missing content that Fallout 3 had, so I did install Tale of Two Wastelands, which also just made checking things a lot easier when I didn't have to load up another game to travel between the two wastelands. But there's sort of an issue here. I couldn't figure out why Goodsprings still had the New Vegas weather. And then that led me to sort of explore the regions a bit. For this, we did actually have to load up the GEC and make a new ESP for this, which really made it easier to visualize. Here I just replaced all the New Vegas weathers from the regions to be those from Fallout 3. So now we have Goodsprings with, well, Fallout 3 weather without any console commands. The same with Vegas using the mall weather, and the wider New Vegas area all getting the deep urban weather. Next up was the landscapes. This was kind of easy. I just looked at the textures unique to New Vegas and replaced them with appropriate ones from Fallout 3. Although, if I'm being honest, this really isn't all that noticeable, considering that the most prominent type of landscape in New Vegas is literally the exact same texture as the one from Fallout 3. It really didn't make much of a difference. The weather alone is responsible for a lot of what makes it look like Fallout 3 compared to New Vegas. So next up after that was the rocks. Initially I took the same approach I did with the landscape, simply just replacing the textures, but this didn't look all that good. It still felt like New Vegas, despite the rocks using the textures from Fallout 3. They didn't feel Fallout 3 enough, if that makes sense. So in the aim of this goal, I decided to replace the models for the rocks themselves. There's a lot of these, and thankfully New Vegas' rocks use the same naming convention and are overall pretty similar in formation to Fallout 3's. So we can get away with just replacing the name for the vast majority of them. But here's where we sort of start to encounter issues. New Vegas' rocks are fully modelled. So just flat out replacing them with Fallout 3's, which often have either an entire side or more omitted, causes some really bad seams in the landscape. Similarly, the cave entrances, although incredibly similar, Fallout 3's ones have that black box for the entrance slightly further forward than the entrances we can find in Mojave. This basically meant that Vault 34 was inaccessible because the door to get in was well behind said black box. So in order to get the rocks to work, we need to load them up into Blender and do some tweaking. The easiest way to do this, I thought, was just kind of extend the capital wasteland rocks back, or maybe duplicate the rocky side and copy it over to the empty ones, but unfortunately I just couldn't get this to look good. So my next idea was kind of what happens if we just sort of bash the two rocks together. That way we have the fully modern New Vegas rocks whilst keeping some of the more jagged cliffs. It's not a perfect solution by any means, but it'll get the job done for now, I guess. Next up on the itinerary was Super Mutants, and this is where our first mod off Nexus actually comes in. For the mutants themselves, I wasn't really happy with any of the available mods on Nexus that replaced the West Coast ones with their East Coast variants, so back into Blender we go. To be fair, this wasn't all that hard, as we only have one base variant of Mutie in the capital. We can just copy that enough times to replace the ones with all the different headgears. And thankfully, because New Vegas separates the armors from the actual mutants, we don't need to worry about that either. This only leaves Marcus and the Nightkin. Because Marcus has a unique model though, I felt it was only fitting he looked distinct from the other mutants in the Mojave. So we decided on making him a super mutant overlord, editing it slightly so that it wouldn't clip with his armor and all of that. I did try to give him lips, but honestly that just made everything look 10 times worse, so a basic overlord mutant it was. But then for the Nightkin we get that Nexus mod, and this is where I'd really suggest something like pre-release Nightkin Replacer, which alters their appearance to match how it appears on the back of the New Vegas box and the literal first image on the Steam page. Here they're a lot more like the Fallout 3 mutants, just being blue variants of the West Coast ones. I mean, even if you don't want to make your game fully Fallout 3 like I'm doing here, this is just a really nice mod. The Nightkin look gross and kind of scary with this, and their white eyes goes a long way in making them a lot creepier. This does also cover Lily as well, so nothing else is required for her. With those, we have mutants fully covered. Then we get to some of the other creatures in the wasteland, like bark scorpions. Now, I could be wrong, I'm not American, but I didn't really think that they would make much sense here. So what I did was slap the albino texture from Broken Steel onto them and change their name into Small Albino Rad Scorpion. Functionally, they're exactly the same as a bark scorpion. I mean, those fuckers are already annoying enough, I'd dread to think how bad they'd be if I gave them the health of the albino red scorpions too. I did the same thing for lake clerks, which was kind of shocking. I completely forgot that Mirelurk Kings existed in Fallout 3, and lake clerks are literally just a retexture without much else, so I just gave them back their original texture and name. There's some animals that just don't really have a nice alternative though, like cazadors and coyotes. However, something like Arccharger's PARCS mod introduces a plethora of new creatures, mainly ones from New Vegas, into the capital Wasteland. This makes it so that when you're exploring GC, you can encounter things like rad wasps, water geckos and wolves, and it really helps with the creature diversity there. And it's a mod I highly suggest you download for Tale of Two Wastelands. It even comes with a new unique weapon for you to go hunt around for too. Unfortunately though, we're not in the capital Wasteland, so we won't be seeing any of them, and as some are pretty much just the enemies from New Vegas, I figured it was okay to leave the others as they are. Although it would be kind of cool to have a patch replace the New Vegas variants with these ones. Although I don't really know who would use that other than me for this video, but... A big part of Fallout 3 though are those random encounters. Whether it be creatures that you can stumble across, raider patrols, or even just caravans, these help the wasteland feel like a much livelier place than it would have been without them. In New Vegas we still have the caravans, but that's pretty much it, so adding some new random encounters in is kind of a no-brainer. For creatures, we're going to use Mojave Wildlife with the Fallout 3 version of the plugin. This mod basically adds in new encounters for when you're exploring the Mojave, and all of these have been hand-placed, so you shouldn't have any issues of NPCs dying to a couple geckos either. And the standard version of the mod only has a set percentage chance of the creatures actually spawning, so if you're playing with a lot of quest mods or a fast travel alternative that has you walking through areas multiple times, hopefully each time should be different. I opted for the Fallout 3 no chance spawns version of the mod though. Unlike the standard version of this mod, the actual creatures that spawn are based off of unused Fallout 3 lists, so the roster of critters you'll be encountering should be more in line with similar encounters from the capital. The one downside to this version is that with the vanilla option, you get more location specific spawns, and we're missing out on that. That being said though, it does mean that we get some more variety. And I chose the non-chance spawns too because, well, we're not really going to be using any quest or fast travel mods, so the chances of us going back to areas we've already visited on foot are kinda slim. We wouldn't be turning the Mojave into a world space developed by Bethesda if we didn't add in more generic raiders. Mojave Raiders is gonna add them in similar to Mojave Wildlife. Unlike that mod though, this also affects locations where raiders spawn in the vanilla game. So now there'll just be more of them around. By default, it does also change the items that raiders will carry on them, and it will make them look like sort of the more generic ones. However, there are options to revert both the Viper and Jackal armors to just those standard Wastelander outfits. So if you just say want to make them more prominent in the world without actually changing their whole design, this is probably going to be the optional file you want to pick up. But integrating the standard raider armors is really nice and it fits with making the game more like Fallout 3. So we're just going to use the main file and nothing else. With that, we basically have all of our enemies covered. I did want to replace the NCR citizen outfits with the generic Wastelander ones, but holy shit, the amount of level lists I'd need to change for that, combined with there not really being as many variants of just Wastelander outfits as there are for the citizen ones, it made areas like Sloan really weird where everyone's just wearing the exact same thing. It doesn't stand out as much in the vanilla game that they are, but here it really does. I could always replace the model for these as that would be easier than going in and tweaking every single level list, but that'd be kind of a half-assed way to do it and I didn't really want to. So, let's deseafy Vegas. By that I mean more the areas surrounding it and the wider Mojave in general. With there really only being two mods that we need to download for this. Mojave Scenery Overhaul changes the variety of locations to be more just built up, I guess. There's more clutter and it utilizes some of the buildings from Washington, which really helps reducing the amount of repetition in these buildings. It also kind of just adds more details to areas, be that in the form of adding more rocks to areas, adding a toll booth to the Cottonwood Overlook, and just in general fleshing out some of the more miscellaneous locations. And although it's not expansive as some of the other landscape mods, it doesn't go overboard, and it keeps the vanilla feeling to the wasteland while still freshening it up if you played the game for over 100 hours. But to really build up the wider Vegas area, we have simple Mojave Urbanization. It's compatible with the scenery overhaul, and it does something pretty similar, just more condensed. It'll make this area that's incredibly barren in the vanilla game feel a lot more like an actual city. It's no DC by any means, but it does introduce some of those taller buildings and stores that were present in the capital. The area around the Fiends is honestly perfect for making it feel like you're exploring some of those urban areas from Fallout 3. It does a really good job, and if there's one mod you should try out of probably all of these, I'd definitely suggest this. It makes this area feel a lot more believable, and really helps this area feel like what you'd expect from a city in a Fallout game. Oh yeah, I've completely neglected gameplay. So Jip has an option that reintegrates big guns in its INI, so we can use that to get the skill back. Unfortunately though, I couldn't find anything that restores the percentage-based speech system, which is really a shame because I kinda prefer it. It allows you to actually see the failed dialogue, which you just don't ever see in the vanilla game, because, well, why would you pick an option that you know is gonna fail? But with all the speech checks in New Vegas, I'm not wholly surprised that there's not an option for this, and not that many people seem to like the percentage-based system in general. Something else that was changed from Fallout 3 to New Vegas was actually the third-person animations. Both walking, running, and jumping all got revised, but we can just copy and paste the animations from these into New Vegas and it'll work fine. I think. I don't know, I didn't experience any issues, but I wouldn't be surprised if there were some. It's kind of weird that they did go through the effort of replacing all of these animations. Fallout 3's were kinda goofy, yeah, particularly that jump, but New Vegas's kind of aren't that much better. The introduction of iron sights was probably the biggest gameplay change from 3 to New Vegas, and as we're not using really any KNVSC animations for our guns, we can run true Fallout 3 aiming, because although true iron sights exist as an option in the settings, it just looks bad in my opinion. Something about having the gun at the bottom of the screen looks incredibly off, but thankfully this mod reverts that change by giving us the Fallout 3 aiming animations back. Unfortunately, if you do want to use any KNVSC animations with this mod, chances are it'll be really hit or miss whether it works correctly or not. Unless you want to hide every single IS animation from your mods, which is a task I wouldn't wish upon anyone, even if you have the everything plugin installed. Thankfully though, we don't have to worry about that, so we can have our gunplay like it was straight from 2008. Similarly on combat, a lot of the more unique VATS attacks, specifically for melee weapons, and a lot of the camera angles for ranged weapons were cut down for whatever reason in New Vegas. Of course, there's a couple mods out there that restore these. Hit VATS changes the timings of some of the cameras and restores the missing ones from Fallout 3, and it also disables the New Vegas ones. So honestly, it's perfect for this. These kill cams are a lot more cinematic than the ones in New Vegas, and there's just more variety here as well, so if you're using VATS a lot, this does help that option feel a lot less repetitive. Melee VATS animation restoration does a pretty similar thing, but this time for the actual animations. And with it installed, we can do things like stomp on rad roaches and treat two-handed weapons like they're all baseball bats. Just a really enjoyable mod if you're doing a melee build. And some small things I didn't really know where to put elsewhere is the E3 Fallout 3 HUD, which just restores that game's health and AP bar. Of course, if you wanted something higher quality, you should use Clean Vanilla HUD Fallout 3 style patch redone, which fits in a lot better if you're using the other Clean UI mods. And whilst we're on the topic of the HUD, you're probably going to want to change your cursor as well, and the one I went for was the Fallout 3 styled one from Cursor Unilaterally Matched. With that though, I think we're done Fallout 3ifying our New Vegas, so now it truly is just a Fallout 3 DLC. I would suggest if you want to do something like this to play with tailored to Wastelands so you can experience 3's base game and DLCs, alongside getting the voice from the Lone Wanderer 2. Anyways, I think that's it. This video took a lot longer than expected. It took me a while to figure out what exactly I wanted to do for the rocks, so that slumped me for like a day, and then the tree LOD was also just a massive headache. I also finally got access to Deadlock, which has been time consuming to say the least. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. I'm not really sure where I could take this, I guess, series next, to be honest. We've done Classic and we've done Fallout 3, so if you have any ideas, let me know. And also if there's any mods you think I've missed, be sure to, well, say them in the comments. With all that being said though, I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, maybe consider liking and subscribing, but I hope to see you all next time.